Breakthroughs will never come from within, they will come from without. And if you're not studying outside your comfort zone, you'll never be able to engineer profound, profitable, and competitively superior breakthroughs.
Mr. J. Abraham, first of all, I would like to say I'm super excited. I'm a really big fan of yours for many years now, and it's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
You've been called the $21.7 billion man and the highest paid marketing consultant in the world, working with over 10,000 clients in more than 1,000 industries worldwide. So can you please share your process when you create a new strategy for a business? I mean, is it different from industry to industry, or do you follow the same guidelines?
The answer is yes on both. There are universal principles that are immutable. They will apply whether you're little, large, local, regional, national, international. And then there are nuances that have to do with the industry or the selling requirements. But there are universal principles that we gave birth to, Jesus. I don't know, something like 30 years ago, my goodness, and I can cite what some of those are. First of all, there's only 3 ways to grow any business. You increase the number of prospects or buyers. You increase the size ethically of the transaction. When possible, you increase the frequency or the utility value. Frequency means if you have a lot of products to sell or a highly repetitive product, you work on making sure that people purchase ethically. Ethically is always what's in their best interest, the maximum amount. If you only have one product or limited, but you know that you've created trust and credibility with that prospect, that buyer, you find other related quality product services that either people buy before, during, after, or other categories people buy because they're the decision maker. So that's first thing, the 3 ways. There's an advanced 3 ways. You penetrate a new market every year. You introduce a new product or service every year. You acquire a company, preferably on a very strategically advantageous basis where you don't put a lot of or any capital or risk out. There's like 200 ways to do it. You add a new product, because every time you add a new product, if it's a modest product, it makes it easier to get someone to start a relationship. The product could be packaged with your existing product or service, and it could maybe not double the revenue, but could double or triple the profit per sale. If it's an expensive product or service, you can make it available towards the end of the purchase cycle, and it could double or redouble again, what's called the lifetime value, the total profit value that a buyer is worth to you. So you do those 3 things. The next thing that you do is you apply what's called the 9 drivers of exponential growth. There's 9 key elements in a business that if you systematically alter them a little, they will produce massively significant improvements. Change your strategy, you change your results. Most small, medium companies are tactical. Change your marketing, you change your results. There's probably 10 elements that marketing can be affected by. You change your business model, you change your results. You change use of capital, and you change your results. You change your systems, processes, procedures. You change your results. You change your I can't even remember. I've got 9 of those. I haven't talked about them for a long time.
How do you prioritize? How do you know what to approach first?
It's a great question, because we have 9. We have the Power Parthenon, which is dramatically expanding. I'm going to sneeze 1 second. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Hold on. One more, please. Maybe not. Oh, I use peppermint. It makes me sneeze. There's 2 ways to do it. For some companies, it depends totally on, it's not one size fits all. It's not one application fits all. You look at a business, and normally you say, where is the biggest logjam or bottleneck that they are not really focusing on, and
Yeah.
that if you got them to do that first, it would open up a massive flow of revenue, business, profit. So you start with where the highest leverage point is. But for some, if they don't really have a lot of anything in play, you start at the beginning and you work all the way through. But usually, because a lot of small, medium businesses don't have as much resources, capital, people,
Right.
infrastructure, a staying power. So you try to give them the most immediate yield, not necessarily the biggest, that will produce a significant profit that they can use to fund the next and the next step. We are introducing a new thesis that's called the hypergrowth business playbook, and it's got three phases. The first phase is totally working on what's called low hanging fruit, things that you're just sitting on that you can very easily, quickly, and with almost no additional effort or expense, just reallocating effort and expense, you
Can
can
you
mod.
name some of those? Sorry, like what you
Absolutely.
call a low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing are is I'm going to give them to you not necessarily in the right order, but you basically target an audience, you make a proposition to them, you hopefully get a response. That response is theoretically either immediately converted or over time converted into a sale. That sale can be a singular sale, can be an increased sale, can be a repetitive sale. So you look at every facet of what's called your revenue system, and you optimize it. You can do it two ways. First is you look at external sources. How are you getting your clients? For small, medium businesses, a surprisingly large number get a lot of people from referral or word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that's great because a referral generated client buys quicker, buys more, negotiates less, buys more often, is more profitable, more enjoyable to deal with, refers more people, and costs nothing. But most companies that get a large portion from that don't even have one systematic and strategic referral generating process in place. We have 125 ways to generate predictable, high value, and no cost, no risk referrals. So we look at everything somebody's doing. Maybe they go to a market, but their proposition is weak. Their positioning is weak. Their offer is weak. The way they try to overcome risk or apprehension is weak. What they do at the point of connection is weak. What they do in their follow-up system, I can go on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you look at every leverage point that most business owners, entrepreneurs don't even recognize have the ability to produce monumental increases. And when you have potentially, I mean, we've seen certain systems that had as many as 30, 40 different, what I'll call impact factors. And each one, if you only increased them 10%, the compound effect can be hundreds of percent increase. If you think about it, 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. So we always focus on what we call working on the geometry of a business and moving them into what we call the exponential performance zone, because far too many entrepreneurs, SMBs, operate in what's called the incremental zone. They do things the same way everybody else does it, not because they are the highest, best, most profitable, lowest risk, highest yielding, greatest value creating activities or approaches. It's just they sort of model what everybody else does, and we try to show people, because I've been exposed to 1,000 different industries, that there are always higher, better, safer, more profitable alternatives. You just have to slow down enough and question the assumptions you're making. And the assumptions are this is the only way, or this is the best way, or I have no control over the results. And when you realize that those are totally erroneous assumptions, it opens up enormous opportunities.
All right. So can you please expand a little bit about this part of exponential or geometric growth instead of a linear one? Is there like specific questions that you ask in order to find those opportunities, or?
Well, I mean, I've been trained in variability. You do something one way, it produces X. You do it another, it can produce 2, 3, 5, 10X now and X's later. We've changed a headline in an ad or the equivalent. The equivalent is a subject line in an email. It's
Yeah.
the first phrase that you you say when you're interacting with a prospect, or the sign or the banner at a trade show, and we have doubled and redoubled yield. We changed a headline one time in an ad for a brokerage firm, and just the same body copy, it got 5 times more results. We tested 33 different ways of greeting somebody at the front door of a very large furniture chain, and found one approach that tripled conversion and multiplied the unit of sale. We have found by changing the positioning of a sales proposition, you could get a 50% increase. We have found that by creating more proof or credibility, testimonials, comparability, endorsements, explanation of how the product is created or the people behind it and their skill sets, you could get another 50%. We've experimented with different forms of risk reversal, what you do to make it easier for a buyer to say yes than no. We've seen those sometimes triple results. We've played around with adding a bonus or changing a bonus, and sometimes double. That's just one category. I mean, I can go on and
So,
on and on.
yeah,
And
but
most,
what is the method? Like test everything until you find what's working?
well, there's a hierarchy. I mean, it depends on an assessment. So if I looked at your business, I would evaluate, first of all, what is your revenue system? Where are you getting your sales, your revenue, your buyers, your prospects, your clients, your patients? Then I would look and see how initially effective I think it is. And it's going to be, so if this is 0 and this is 100, we would sort of mentally give it a ranking. Let's say it's closer to 100. Well, then we would not worry as much about bringing people in. We'd look at the
Yeah.
next. What do you do when you bring them into you know, your world? Do you close them well? Do you follow up well? Is your proposition well? But if you're not targeting well, or if you're not targeting accurately, or if you're not targeting with the best message, then we look there. As we go through the system, we first try to evaluate where you have the biggest gaps, or the biggest bottleneck, or the biggest weakness. And we normally will fill that first. For example, let's say that you bring in, just hypothetically, 1,000 leads, 1,000 prospects, 1,000 visitors, 1,000 opt-ins, 1,000 registrants to your webinar a month, and you convert 2%. Well, the first thing we would do is say, well, that, rather than trying to get you double the number, let's try to get you double or triple the conversion.
Yeah, sure.
We look at what you're realizing every time you convert. Let's say you're getting $200 a sale. We would evaluate whether there was an ethical and honorable way to turn that $200 into 4 or 5 by adding more or upgrading or putting more support or tech support or bonuses into it, or higher qualitatively. Then we'd see what you do when you're done selling whatever you sell. How do you set up, if you have multiple products or purchases, how do you ethically set up the repeat? We just go all the way through the system. And sometimes one of the things I do a lot of here in the States, and it's quite profoundly profitable, is we help people set up strategic alliances, joint ventures. We call them power
Yeah.
partnerships, endorsements, co-branding, situations where you become the recommended provider. And there's 43 different applications for that, and almost none of them require any extra investment or risk, but they give you access to a massively expanded world of sales possibilities. In the States, the top 2,000 corporations right now get 20% of their average revenue. This is profound, but 40% of their profit from partnerships. Microsoft, for example, gets 30 $2 billion in one division, and 95% of it is from partnerships. Zoom in Japan gets 40 or 50% from partnerships. Shopify here gets 60% from partnerships. But most small, medium businesses don't realize they can align with other people that already have a trusted, credible access and relationship with the same audience they want. I mean, I can go on and on and on because we have literally 97 exponential performance enhancement methodologies that we have pioneered and then refined over my career. I've been doing this a lot of years, a lot of decades, a lot of places, a lot of parts of the world, a lot of industries. So it's given me understanding that is very unique.
Thank you. Can you share a specific story maybe about any kind of partnership for
Sure.
maybe
Sure. I'll be
a
happy
small, medium business, not like a large
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
enterprise?
Well, I mean, or how about a small one that became large? I mean, because that is a possibility, and hopefully it's an aspiration that some of the small businesses have. So years
Yeah.
and years ago, we took a product that was only doing $20,000 and had no marketing money. It was an arthritis preparation that was sold direct to consumers, and I was able to get over 1,000 radio stations, television stations, magazines, newspapers to run advertising for that product and not get paid for advertising, but get paid for the actual sales that resulted. And we ended up with 500,000 repeat buyers 18 months later, and we did $60 million and sold it for a fortune. We took a small brokerage firm that was only doing $300,000, and they were running ads in all the investment magazines and newspapers. And we realized that the best audience would be to become the recommended provider for financial investment newsletters. And I was able to get about 40 newsletters to agree to make them the recommended provider after we passed due diligence and we proved our ethics and credibility. And we ended up doing $500 million, which is a $500 million. I got into the seminar business in 1986, and in about a 4-year period, everyone else was selling $500 seminars. I was selling $15,000 and $20,000, and we actually had a $30,000 one. We ended up doing $250 million. That's a $250 million. And I did it all by having other people partner with me. Here, Tony Robbins partnered with me, Success Magazine, Entrepreneur Magazine, a bunch of seminar companies, a bunch of financial newsletters. And I didn't pay anything to them until and unless they generated revenue. In Australia, one time we had a home builder who was generating his buyers by spending a lot of money on newspaper ads. And we realized that he could spend a fraction of that partnering with high-end apartments that had the profile of young marrieds who were on the verge of wanting to buy a house. And we became the recommended builder provider for these apartments. And we ended up cutting our marketing cost in half and doubling our revenue. In Japan, I had a client, not a bad one. It was the number one driving school in Tokyo. They had 3 offices, but driving training is a very modestly profitable business. I think they make about $1,200 a student. There's only a very narrow window that you can reach. They're like 19 to 26. They're very hard to reach, very inefficient. Once they take that one driving training, they don't usually want advanced training. And then we found out that half of the people that get a license never drive it. In Japan, it's a badge of honor. Hey, I got a license. Oh. The other half of the other half don't buy a car. They just rent a car for holidays and weekends. And when we made that connection, we went to the driving school and said, the real opportunity is not selling driving training. It's having a partnership with a car rental agency, because you get somebody at 19 or 26, they're going to rent cars until they're 65. If you have a way to make sure they rent those from you, the yield, the dollars, the profit you're going to get over their lifetime is so many times more than the $1,200 you make on that. And we ended up making a deal. It paid off massively, but they were only three offices in Tokyo. So then we took that model and we went to every other every other driving school outside of Tokyo. And we made a deal where we partnered with them and we took the model and we licensed it. So there's all kinds of ways you can use, let's say, intellectual capital and understanding to to figure out where bigger opportunities exist for a business that thinks they have very, very significant limitations. I don't believe anybody has limitations. We've taken little companies, just local merchants, and had them partner with other local merchants that were complementary, and we've doubled business, and it costs almost nothing, or whatever it costs, you pay out of the revenue. We've shown people that if they have a very profitable, highly repetitive product, sometimes by giving away the first sale to a partner and letting them keep all the first sale motivates that partner to really promote to their audience. And you don't make anything on the first sale, but if there's 100 repeat sales, you make all of the profit on that. So it's really understanding how to think at a very, very highly more elevated level than the people you compete against.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. But what is the first step? Is like thinking through the eyes, maybe of the person in the other side.
So
What does he want from me?
let me. I'm not trying to step on you, but let me give you a clearer answer. When I was
Yeah,
younger than you, I got started, and I've been doing this a long time, and I made a
yeah,
realization that to me was quite profound. It was a concept that I came to call funnel vision versus tunnel vision. The concept is based on an observation that real breakthroughs do not usually come from within an industry, they come from without. In the United States, and it probably is equally as applicable in Israel, fiber optics, which transformed telecommunication, was not created by telecommunication. It was created in aerospace, and they borrowed it. Federal Express created a whole industry by borrowing what's called the hub and spoke check clearing process that our Federal Reserve Bank uses to make sure people don't bounce checks. So they need to clear them early in the morning. And they just modeled the same thing. The ballpoint pen or roll-on deodorant borrowed that from one another. Rogaine for hair came from pimple medicine. Viagra came from heart medicine. The number one baby buggy in the United States, they sell $400 million worth. They borrowed the collapsible wheels from airplanes. So the key is understanding that breakthroughs come from outside. The more you understand, there's a concept called knowledge asymmetry. What that means is you understand implications, correlations, you see connections that your competitors don't. And that gives you very, very significant ethical advantage. Everything I talk about has the word ethical in front of it, because you don't need to be covert. You don't need to be surreptitious. You just have to see things that your competitors don't and know how to act on them. And most of what I learned, you can try out, you can test, you can experiment very inexpensively. But if you don't keep trying to find breakthroughs, then you're going to be stuck doing the same thing as everybody else.
yeah,
And if you don't have any great advantage, you're nothing more than a commodity.
yeah. That's right. Thanks. So can you please tell me about a major crisis you had in a business and how you've grown from it? Maybe share some lessons.
Sure. I mean, there, it we we created a whole program once about recession proofing a business. People, when they get into a down market, whether there's an economic downturn, whether the industry or technology changes, many people who are reactive don't know what to do, and they either keep doing the same thing that doesn't work, or they freeze and get paralyzed, or they cut costs, and usually the costs they cut are in marketing and service. What we realize is that anytime there's a crisis, with very little exception, there's always still going to be some commerce done. Your job is to, pardon me, figure out how you can command the majority of the new people coming into the market, which is smaller, but it's still going to be significant. And then, secondly, you want to be able to attract the most desirable buyers from your competitors, because what they typically do is cut costs on service. They get rid of the most talented and expensive people that have the relationships. And if you understand how to really how to capitalize on all that, you can grow dramatically through it. I mean, we've helped companies. I'll give you an example. When COVID started, there were a number of things that happened. Many companies, they terminated their most expensive people because they wanted to get their overhead and their payroll down.
Yeah.
But what they didn't realize was the most expensive people were the ones that had the relationships with most of the clients. I was able to get my client companies to find all these people that got terminated who had the relationships. We didn't have big budgets. We recruited them, and we were able to say, look, we will give you a huge percentage of the initial business you bring us from all these people that you have built until you got terminated, this wonderfully trusted relationship. And we made millions of dollars. We were able to find companies that didn't know how to respond, and they were losing money and they were paralyzed, and we were able to acquire them for no out of pocket, giving them a percentage of the revenue. We were able to consolidate their buyers into ours. We were able to eliminate their overhead, and we were able to turn their losing business into profit. Sorry, 1 second. I got dogs here, and somebody just came in. Hold on. I think they've stopped. We were able to go to 800 different radio stations, television stations that all of a sudden had almost no advertisers because nobody was going to the retail anymore. They couldn't. And we were able to get them to run ads for my clients that generated leads that could be serviced either by phone or by Zoom. And we got millions and millions of dollars of advertising that we only had to pay for based on results. I can go on, but it's always looking at where's the opportunity, where's the underperformance, where is the connection nobody else sees.
All right. So it depends on what you're focusing on, right?
Well, the point is,
if you see the crisis or you see the opportunity, right?
Well, I would say that the bottom line here is there's always more opportunity than you see, even in adversity. And we've had companies that were really not doing well because it was so competitive. And then we realized that there is a modestly priced product that people buy before they buy your category. And we basically either create or buy a company that had that modest price product that people buy before they start buying your category. And by just doing that, we would get advanced access to buyers that ahead of every other competitor. So it's just understanding how to see what's really going on and how to recognize where the big opportunity is. Everyone looks at danger. If you look at it in the Chinese, I think it's Chinese, they have a symbol for crisis, and the definition has two sides: danger, opportunity. I think it depends on how your brain gets wired or rewired, and we just look at opportunity. We say, where can we gain greater performance, greater yield? So there's a concept in business that it's patterned after hedge funds. A hedge fund is set up to theoretically create what's called asymmetric, outsized performance upside and de-risk or minimize the down. Now, a lot of them don't do it very well, but that's their intention. We believe that should be the model a business should try to follow. That they should always try to go for outsized performance, but very low or no risk. And it's very easy to do when you really understand the power of performance-based thinking. And I can get into it, but ask me anything else. I hope this makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. Thanks. Well, from your experience and perspective, would you say it's better to be involved in many businesses, like for entrepreneurs, many businesses versus focusing on one great business and making it even greater? I mean, how would you recommend taking on new business ventures without losing your focus? I guess that's the question.
I think that it's fascinating because there's not a one size fits all answer.
Yeah,
Let me try to give you a better answer than most people. So the first question is, what is the game that entrepreneur or business owner wants to play? Meaning, do they want it to be a lifestyle business? Do they want it to be a high growth business? Do they want it to be a business that just produces a very nice, comfortable income? Do they want it to be a business that produces asset value they can sell for many times what they earn in a year? That's the first question, because the answer determines the strategy they follow. If they want it to grow a little, then it's just maximizing what they're doing and adding higher performing revenue and reselling methods. If they want to really grow a lot, then before you start acquiring a lot of businesses, the first thing you do is decide, is the business you're in the best vehicle to get you the outcome you want? A lot of people are in a business that doesn't have, even if you blow it up, blowing it up isn't big enough to get them the outcome they want. And they are better off selling it, bringing a manager in, closing it, getting their capital out and putting it into something better. But assuming it's a good business that hasn't come close to being maximized, we always say maximize what you are doing first, because if you do and you get it systematically stabilized, you can bring someone else in to run it, and you can take the increased revenue to acquire something else. There is a totally different philosophy, and we have a very big book on this. In fact, it's here behind me. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Business Wealth Without Risk. And the concept is, why start a business from scratch when you have a 1 in 20 first year success and a 1 in 10 5-year success, when in fact you can acquire businesses that are underperforming but have been validated over that 1 year, 5-year period. There are 200 ways you can acquire them with very little or any out-of-pocket capital and very low risk. And then you can basically blow them up through many of the strategies I've got. And then you can do what we call an epic exit for a mammoth payday, or you can use it to build a mini empire. But there's not, I mean, the one thing that people think is one size fits all. There are universal principles, but even they need to be utilized on a priority basis, meaning there's always going to be what's called a log jam. There's always going to be 1 or 2 factors in the business that if you relieve that stoppage, it's going to make a lot more revenue, a lot more profit flow, and then you keep working through the next and the next. And you can acquire businesses. You could basically say, what else do people buy before, during, after, even instead? Now, why would you buy instead? 2 reasons. Let's assume that you were selling a supplement for weight loss.
All right.
Most people take a supplement for 2 or 3 months and then they stop and they'll try another supplement. They very rarely change their diet, their exercise, so they don't lose a lot of weight and they're not very disciplined. But the same people, if you study them, They buy exercise equipment. They buy what's called portion control food delivered to their door. They buy memberships in health clubs. They buy recipes. They buy virtual group training. They buy personal training. So if you compete against yourself because you already have attracted a buyer you know has a almost a lifetime desire to lose weight, you can sell them many other things. I mean, there's lots of different ways of thinking that are way, way, way more elevated than the average small business owner, but they can apply to any small business when you master them.
All right. Can you share one small story about that? A short story?
Well, I can share 100 stories, but you have to be a little more clarifying because I have so many. What do you want the story to explain? Tell me that.
About the acquiring businesses without money out of pocket, what you said earlier.
Sure,
It's fascinating.
I absolutely can. So let's think of an easy one. So I have many clients that have audiences that are the same buyers that would buy a related product. One of them in Europe was able to acquire a number of smaller businesses in the same field because they were able to show the owners that were struggling that if my client took over those businesses, they would be able to get rid of all the overhead that was causing the smaller business to be unprofitable. They would turn unprofitable revenue into profitable revenue. They could pay the owner of the small business more money for doing nothing than they were making from working their heart out and stressing because they didn't want to lose the business. My client had the audience that would immediately take advantage of the smaller businesses. So that's easy. I mean, there's many ways to do it. You can buy it. We've bought businesses and paid on results. We've bought businesses and given, if we bought a business, there's a concept called a roll up. You put many of the same kind of businesses together. And so in combination, it has significance, and an acquirer, a private equity or a strategic buyer will pay enormously more for $50 million worth of revenue than they would for $500,000 worth of revenue. We have a colleague who rolls up dental practices. A dental practice averages about $1 million in revenue. The dentist makes $200,000 or $300,000 from doing it here. If it's sold, it would sell for 3 or 4 times that. It would sell for the profits, 600,000. This man buys half of the practice, gives the dentist a liquidation, an exit, a partial exit. Then he provides growth to the practice that makes it 2 or 3 times that size, 2 million or 3 million. The dentist keeps half of it, so he makes double from his half than he was making. They've got 50 different practices they've done this with, and now they've got a total of about $100 million of revenue. And if it was one practice for $1 million, it would sell for about 3 times. But because they have a footprint all over the country, it's worth about $350 million. So a very different dynamic. Revenue and profit at a different stage, at a different scale, is worth a lot more of a multiple if you're selling it than it is small. So you can do a roll up. You can license. I mean, we had a client that had a lumber mill in the South, and he was masterful at the most critically expensive part of operating a lumber mill, which is called kiln drying. Kiln drying is the heating process where you take green timber that you cut down, you heat it, and you, first of all, you cut it into boards, but it's soft and green. By heating it, it makes it solid lumber. And it's the most expensive part. Energy is the most expensive part of a lumber mill. If you do it wrong, you have substandard grades or a lot of waste or scrap. If you do it right, you have much higher grades that command more premium price, but you also have less scrap. He had the ability to get higher grades, less scrap, but he also was able to cut his energy expense 30% below the average lumber mill. That's the good news. The bad news is lumber is heavy. He could have given it away after about 1,000 miles from his lumber mill, and the cost of transportation would have been too expensive for anyone to accept it. So what we did, he was making $2 million a year from his lumber mill. We were able to take his methodology, how he reduced his energy costs, how he enhanced the grades, the higher grades, how he reduced scrap or waste. And we were able to turn it into a system and license 250 other lumber mills outside his competitive area. Each paid $25,000 a year to use his license. He was making $2 million from his lumber mill and over $5 million from letting other people use his process. I have dozens of stories like that. I mean, just right. This is all based on understanding how to think at a level that nobody else does.
So you're always looking for hidden assets, right? For proven systems that you can apply anywhere.
Yeah, we used to, and I haven't said this for years, but we used to say the key to all this is identifying hidden assets, overlooked opportunities, underperforming revenue activities, underutilized relationships, undervalued resources, and turning them into windfall profits, and then converting those to ongoing multiplied income streams that were perpetual. And when you learn to think that way, you see it's as if the whole world was a 3D movie and you've got the only pair of glasses, or you're looking at it like from a nuclear microscope when everyone else doesn't see anything. And that gives you profound performance, profit, and success advantage over everybody else. And you can literally be playing a totally different game than they do. And that's what we do all day long for the people we help.
All right. Yeah, that sounds great. Well, you've managed a lot of people over the years, I guess. Please share some insights about managing people, employees and partners.
Well, there's a fundamental first step, and there's a quote that I learned earlier in my life, and it's very true. You hire the best, and you cry only once when you have to agree to pay them, because most people hire mediocre people, and a mediocre is worth about 1/5 the value of a great person, and mediocre people don't usually perform well, and they can cost you. So, first thing is have the best people. The second is you have to be what I call preeminent. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophical strategy or a strategic philosophy that is based on wanting to be seen in the eyes of your market from a competitive standpoint as the most trusted advisor your prospective buyer could turn to for life, the only viable solution or provider of the opportunity they could possibly turn to. And a couple of key elements. One is you have to have everybody be on a crusade or a mission in behalf of the client you serve. You don't fall in love with your industry or your product or service or your company. You fall in love with the people whose lives or businesses or health or happiness or wealth you are enhancing or protecting or improving. You basically you commit that you're not going to allow people to buy less than they should or more than they should. You're going to give them the most well-reasoned, externally focused advice to what's going to serve them the best. It's about not trying to squeeze everything you can out of your team, but developing everything you can within them. It's about basically, having passion for everybody you deal with and making the world better off because you're in their lives. So, I mean, I can go on and on, but there's a lot of fundamentals.
All right. So as we said earlier, about collaborations, I guess it's the same. It's thinking about the person in the other side and what he needs from you, right? And
everything, and you just nailed it. Everything, this every driver of this is trying to realize what it's like to be on the receiving end,
yeah,
not what it's like to be on the provider end. And even as fascinating as this is, value, the concept of value, can be very different to a prospective buyer than it is to the provider. We think, oh, they love this pen, they love this blue pen, they love this fact that it locks in your pocket well, they love the fact that and maybe that's not at all what they value. They
yeah.
may want some totally different set of advantages or benefits or
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry, you were cut in the middle of the
said,
sentence.
until you know what the prospective buyer values, you could be way out of
Yeah,
alignment if you're trying to offer one thing and they're trying to, and their basis of buying is on a whole different criteria.
yeah. So always talk to your clients, right? And
Yeah.
all right. How do you identify a great business opportunity? I mean, what is your criteria?
Well, I mean, anytime there is a supremely quality product, service, or company that is dramatically underperforming the potential, and they have competitors that are pretty mediocre and are not really trying to be preeminent, then the first thing you look at is what I would call where's the arbitrage. This company could be up here and everyone else is here. And then you ask, if you got them here, what could it would it look like? How much revenue? How much profit? We work on we most of what I do, I get a one-time retainer, and it's actually relatively large, but the majority of our interest is on what we call the upside, sharing in the increased profits or value we create. So when we look at a business, first thing I want to know is what's its true potential? How much underperformance exists right now? What could we do with the assets? What could we do with the product, the service, the company, their marketing, their salespeople, their distribution capabilities, their brand? And we ask ourselves a multitude of questions. And if they have an enormous upside that is not being realized, and that can be mined, like realized and monetized and turned into profit for very little risk on the part of the company, then we get excited. Then we try to ascertain whether that the owner of that business is definitely a monster of execution, if he or she has what we call a prejudice towards action, if they have a willingness to be nonlinear and open their mind to super logical but very different ways of thinking, if they are committed enough to constantly experimenting, and then finally, if they're generous enough that they share adequately the upside with us, and if they not just can afford our fee, which is not inexpensive, but they have enough staying power to go the distance to build the success strategy to get them to this much higher place. So we look at factors like that. Now we got to decide, do we like their personality? Do we like the industry they're in? Do we like the value they bring? Do we like their team? Do we like their attitude? Do we like their values? And so it's I think I'm probably not giving you the universal answers you want, and that's because, you know, if you think about this, I use an analogy that there's not one size fits all answer. If you ever see a woman wearing a one size fits all dress, one woman looks beautiful, stunning. The rest of them, it's too tight, too loose, too short. It's not one size fits all. Very rarely. There are universal principles that you combine into a unique hybrid. a customized integration depending on what the business requires to produce not only the fastest, but the most sustainable, because there's different goals. Again, if your lifestyle, you don't want a great business. You just want to basically make, 200,000, 300,000, $500,000 and not have a lot of stress. If you're really building a business or a mini empire, you have a whole different focus. If you're a startup, the first thing you have to do is mitigate the fact that when you start that business, you're starting it out with a 1 in 20, a 5% success probability. How do you reduce that and increase the viability? And you do that usually by having partnerships, strategic alliances, ways that you can tap into markets without having to waste very precious capital and time on advertising or marketing. You work with other people that already have the audience. But there's lots of different ways to go about this, and that's why I can drive people crazy, because they want me to give them the simple, singular way to be many times more prosperous and successful. And it's like, if you said to me, how do I get healthier? Well, I'd say, well, that depends. Let's look at your blood work. Let's look at what your exercise interests are. Let's look at your age. Let's look at the time you have to allocate. Let's look at what you want healthy to define it. Is it just being better,
So
better blood?
I guess what you have to know is how to ask the right questions. Is that
We
correct?
Yeah, we asked 200. We have an assessment that I want to look at that has 200 different factors we look at before we start a relationship with a client, because I want to know what I'm dealing with. I want to know how it's performing. I want to know the reasons they do things. I want to know the results they're getting, and I want to know where the opportunities lie the fastest and the biggest. And the fastest and the biggest are not necessarily the same.
Yeah, of course. All right. Can you recommend some tools or habits for creating long-lasting success and abundance? Anything that
Sure.
has worked for you in the past?
Yeah. I mean, what I've always done, there was a phrase that was introduced to me, and it really made sense. You never want to be the smartest person in a room. You want to be the dumbest. You want to be around people who are brighter than you, number one. Number two, you want to travel outside your industry. There is a book that came out 3 or 4 years ago called Range, Range. It was by a very prominent writer, last name Epstein, and it made a great premonition. It said the people that are going to own success in the second part of the 21st century are the ones that have the most diverse range of understanding, because the world's not the same. And you can't base it on hindsight or even insight within an industry. You have to be able to draw upon all kinds of diverse understanding. We basically try to get people to study everything they can outside their industry, because that's where the breakthroughs come from. We make a point that's very interesting. You obviously know the concept of best practices, right?
Yeah.
The best practices is a flawed concept, because if your company happens to learn the best practice way ahead of everybody, you have a short-term window of opportunity. But sooner or later, everybody learns the best practice, so it becomes standard operating procedure, and everyone's doing the same thing. So, the consumer may benefit, your productivity, efficiency may benefit, but you'd have no competitive advantage if everyone's doing the same. But you have enormous advantage if you're doing what nobody else understands in ways they don't understand it, and you're doing many different integrations of that. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Well,
Well, please list 3 books that you would recommend on the topics of business and self-development.
uh, well, I mean, I think that Stephen R. Covey has a book that he wrote years ago, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, or I
Yeah.
think that's what it's called. It's profound. His son, Stephen M.R. Covey, has done enormous research on business trust building, and he's seen that companies, people, leaders who understand the 13 characteristics of trust can have a 300% advantage over everybody else. Uh, there is a book that's popular by a guy named Gino Wickman called Traction. And, I guess everybody should read probably Think and Grow Rich. And
Yeah.
then so many books that come out now, and a lot of them that come out today tend to be more tactical. And I tend to be much more holistic and look at the strategic totality of a business because everything really interrelates. You can have the greatest funnel or the greatest website, but that doesn't mean you're going to have the most successful, enduring business. I want to know how every piece interreacts, advances, and enhances the goal of the enterprise. So, yeah, I just think that, I mean, and if you don't have time, there is an interesting derivative that you might want to pick up on. So the average person reads only about 3 books a year, and most of them aren't necessarily business books. But if you can consume 3 books a week by doing book summaries, and that's 3 times 52, 152, it's not even linear. You have such an outsized advantage. And I also think that besides books, everybody should look at everybody in their life, their neighbors, their relatives, their synagogue members or congregationalists, and anybody in a different industry or business. Interview them, ask them what their business does, how it does it, how their business models, their operational models. Go online and force yourself to study things you've never thought about. We used to do seminars that were huge, and we would go and buy books and magazines on skill sets, hobbies, sports, and business, and we would identify what somebody really loved, like what your hobby is. And let's say your hobby is exercise. We would give you either a book or a magazine on cake decorating or macrame or origami, and we'd make you read 2 chapters or 2 articles and come back and present a profound insight you realize that you could modify from that knowledge and really apply directly or indirectly, and everybody was able to do it. Breakthroughs will never come from within, they will come from without. And if you're not studying outside your comfort zone, you'll never be able to engineer profound, profitable, and competitively superior breakthroughs. That's probably the conclusion I would give you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, 2 last questions, all right?
Sure.
I mean, Jay, you're really world renowned, and what gives you the drive and motivation to keep going after all these years?
It's really a derivative of the same one that started me. I love entrepreneurs that have passion, purpose, and a sense of possibility. I call it the 3 Ps. I love people that are really trying, even if they are not crystallized on it, to either fill voids or add greater value in a category, an industry, a product area that their competitors don't. I hurt for people who invest a lifetime doing what they do and unknowingly accept a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the results, the impact, the contribution, and the rewards that the effort, the opportunity, and the intention could produce. And I'm very I love discovery. I find every human being interesting. I mean, there's certain ones in your country, that there's certain just horrible people, but I find entrepreneurs really interesting, and I find most of them really are not value creators. They are just proprietors trying to take economic oxygen out of the air. When I meet somebody who really is driven to create true value, advanced, enhanced, and decisively recognize superior value for their market, I get really excited. And that's what drives me. I've been very blessed. I've traveled around the world, not exactly around, but I've been to Asia, 30, 40 times. I've been to Europe about the same. I've been everywhere from Singapore, Vietnam, China, France, doing this all over the world. And it rocks me to see quality people who are driven to make a bigger difference. And the people that understand that you are rewarded financially and psychically in direct proportion to the problems you solve, to the quantity, quality, and consistency of problems you solve and opportunities you make possible for others inspire me. That's probably the best answer I can give you.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And one last question for you today.
Sure.
What is the most valuable advice you would give your younger self when you were first growing a business?
This is a very interesting one. It's going to sound a little different, but somebody said this to me when I was young and it just haunted me forever. He said, you can lose all your money, but if you maintain your integrity, somebody will always back you. But if you try to keep your money and you sell out your integrity, you'll never get your integrity back.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. J. Abraham. It's been
My
a privilege.
My pleasure. I hope it had value.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.